Welcome to the first module of Introduction to Public Services, Knowing Your Community, a State of Iowa core course for the State Library Endorsement Program. My name is Becky Heil, and I'm the Southeast District Consultant and a member of the Continuing Education team for the State Library. Today, we'll be talking about how valuable it is for the library to understand their community and become one of the essential services for the town. We want you to be able to find and use information to better address the needs of your citizens. First, let's take a look at the variety of ways to find information about your community and the people who live there. This quote from an article titled "Know Thy Users" speaks to the reasons we collect data and how important it is to our users. Instead of a top-down decision-making, we want to make sure the choices that we make in collections, programs, and other services reflect the needs of our users, not what's best for the library. And of course, we're always looking for ways to engage our non-users, turning them into library supporters. Let's start talking about this type of data gathering by differentiating between qualitative and quantitative information. One way to talk about that is outcomes versus outputs. Qualitative data is numbers data, outputs. Qualitative data is impact, outcomes. Qualitative data tends to be more complex. It shows the layers of impact of your library's programs and services. Qualitative data shows complexity that isn't always there with just numbers alone. Telling the library story uses a qualitative approach. You collect qualitative data through a variety of ways: open-ended survey questions, interviews, and focus groups all produce qualitative data. It can be used to fill in the blanks that quantitative data sometimes leaves. Quantitative data, though, can be very useful for budget presentations and quick, succinct explanations of how effective your programs and services are. Librarians tend to be very good at gathering and using quantitative data. We like our statistics, and we know how to count the number of people, the number of programs, and the number of books. Currently, there's an emphasis on telling the library's story through qualitative measures. You may hear about outcome-based evaluation. It helps the library explain why their services are so important, not just how much we do. So let's explore some ways that you can gather qualitative data. We'll take a look at a variety of ways to get feedback on library programs and services, as well as ways to learn more about your community. First, how to get qualitative data by using focus groups, surveys, and interviews. You will hear me repeat this over and over in this module. Before conducting any kind of data collection, make sure you know what you're hoping to find out and what you will do with the information. There are three pieces to putting together a focus group. First, you must consider who you want to listen to. This group is frequently called stakeholders. You identify people who can not only speak to their own experience, but they should represent various facets of your community. Then, someone must serve as a facilitator or a moderator. Their primary function is to run the session, asking the questions, managing the group, and collecting and assessing the information. The discussion guide is simply the agenda for the session. Determine what information you are trying to collect, then figure out what questions to ask to get that information. Another qualitative way is focus groups. One way to get information from citizens in a focus group is through what we call a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A SWOT analysis can be helpful in viewing your community. A group of stakeholders comes together, and with a facilitator, they start thinking about what things they have in their community that make the community a great place to live. They then talk about outside opportunities that might help achieve a community vision. On the opposite side, the people talk about what's missing in their community and what outside threats they perceive. This can inform the library about how they might step in and try to solve the community's challenges, thereby making the library a part of the solution. Listening to people's views of the community can be a very helpful exercise in learning about your community. Surveys or questionnaires are instruments for collecting data in survey research. They usually include a set of standardized questions that explore a specific topic and collect information about demographics, opinions, attitudes, or behaviors. Surveys are used to increase knowledge in fields such as social research and demography. Survey research is often used to assess thoughts, opinions, and feelings. Remember, there's a difference between statistical surveys and a more informal gathering of opinions. Unless you spend a lot of money to get a professional poll done, your data will not necessarily be statistically accurate. But that's okay. There are more than 100 different ways to ask a question, and the question type has a direct impact on the survey results. For instance, text entry questions are the most reliable, but they also lead to respondent fatigue faster, so you should limit those types. In a non-intimidating survey environment, you will learn about what motivates survey respondents and what's important to them, and gather meaningful opinions, comments, and feedback. A non-intimidating survey environment is one that best suits the privacy needs of the survey respondent. Respondents are more likely to provide open and honest feedback in a more private survey method. Methods such as online surveys, paper surveys, or mobile surveys are more private and less intimidating than face-to-face survey interviews or telephone surveys. We also want to evoke discussion. Give your survey respondents an opportunity to discuss important key topics. Communicate with your respondents about your survey topic. This allows you to dig deeper into your survey and can incite topics related to your survey within a broader perspective. To base your decisions on objective information, we conduct surveys in an unbiased approach to decision making. Don't rely on your gut feelings to make important business decisions. You can collect unbiased survey data and develop sensible decisions based on analyzed results. By analyzing the results, you can immediately address topics of importance rather than waste time and valuable resources on areas of little or no concern. Survey results provide a snapshot of the attitudes and behaviors, including thoughts, opinions, and comments about your target survey population. This valuable feedback is your baseline to measure and establish a benchmark from which to compare results over time. Before you create a survey, there are some things you need to think about first. Again, identify what you want to know and how you plan to use it. You won't get the information you need if you don't know what you want. And there's no point in asking questions if you aren't going to use the information gathered. Make sure you're asking what you really need. Don't add in peripheral questions like, wouldn't it be nice to know if? Be very specific in what you ask. Related to that is don't make your survey too long. And while open-ended questions can give you great information, it's also very difficult to categorize. Also, don't use things like jargon. How often do you use ILL? Don't have vague questions in there. How do you think your library can transform this community? Don't ask leading questions. How much did you enjoy our popular adult coloring program? And try not to do double-barreled questions. As an example, how often do you attend children's or adult programs? Avoid questions that might make respondents uncomfortable. What do you consider sexually explicit material? Project Outcome is a set of free surveys for evaluating the effectiveness of your programs. One-on-one interviews are very similar to surveys and focus groups. You need to find the right questions in the same way you do with a survey. You need to figure out what you want to know and what you will do with the results. While this will not be a statistically valid assessment, it's important to ask everyone the same questions. It will make it easier to group the answers and get useful results. Ask the same questions to every person, but try to dig down through their answers. If the question is, what do you like about your community? And they answer great parks, you might follow up with, why do you think it's so important to have parks in town? One of your questions might be, how can the library help with the challenges you've identified in your town? Ask them to be specific. Would a program at the library help with an issue, or might it be staff training, or a different focus on purchasing materials? You also need to assure people that their answers will not be tied to them specifically. People will be more honest if they understand that their answers will be combined with everyone else's. Now, let's move on to quantitative data. In community analysis, you are really asking both who and what is in your community. One way to gather community information is through something called a community scan. You ask a group of people, usually your board or your staff, to do an in-depth look at your community and what it has. Think about things like educational facilities, services like medical providers or tax preparers, or nonprofits like a food bank or service groups. Is there local media like a newspaper? And how many in-home daycare providers are there? How many and what type of businesses are there in town? This information can be hard to gather, but it gives a really good picture or a snapshot of your community. You will also use census data to supplement your community scan, but we'll talk a little bit more about using census data in a minute. So a community scan will help us learn who is in our community. What are their social and economic characteristics? What are their affiliations and connections? What are their past experiences? What are their talents? What are their aspirations for the community? And as we learn about what is in the community, we figure out what keeps people in town. What are the amenities that people appreciate and utilize? All of this can help shape the direction of the library. Another way to get some of the numbers that we use to understand the communities we serve is through census information. The Census Bureau's mission is to serve as the nation's leading provider of quality data about its people and economy. These are just a few of the things you can learn about your community through census data. We'll talk about using this information later on, but I'd like you to start thinking about how you might use this data to look at things like your hours open, who to hire, what kinds of programs to provide, and what time of day to hold them, or where you want to hold your programs. Think about things like how many computers you have, or what kind of space you want to provide for your town. The basic demographic information gathered by the U.S. Census Bureau only includes name, age, sex, and race by family groupings. However, they also gather significantly more information through the American Community Survey, which was previously called the long form. So what does the American Community Survey collect? The ACS collects information including detailed social, economic, housing, and demographic characteristics. The survey samples approximately 3.5 million addresses each year. Data is collected continuously throughout the year to provide estimates, and those estimates cover more than 40 topics. Social characteristics might include topics such as education, marital status, fertility, veterans, disability status, place of birth, and others. The ACS also collects basic demographic characteristics such as age, sex, race, and Hispanic origin. Economic characteristics include such topics as employment status, income, commuting to work, occupation, industry, health insurance, and others. Housing characteristics include topics such as tenure, information about occupancy, and the structure itself, which includes home value, housing cost, utilities, plumbing, kitchen facilities, and others. It also includes financial information about housing. This survey is where the bulk of the information you'll want to use comes from. You can find lots of information on the federal website, census.gov. But if you've ever looked at that site, the amount of information is simply overwhelming. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Every state has a state data center, and in Iowa, we are very lucky that the center and its employee resides within the state library. One of the tabs on the state library website is called For Data Center. Gary Krob is the coordinator of the Iowa State Data Center, and he can be your secret weapon to find and unravel demographic information. He has lots of great tables and charts that he puts together every year. He also maintains the Iowa Quick Facts page. Of particular interest to you will be the city quick facts and the county quick facts. You are able to choose your city or county and get a series of pages with useful demographic information. You can use the State Data Center and Gary for grants and for your patrons. As I mentioned before, we librarians are great at counting things. Every year, we ask library directors to fill out a long survey filled with information about your library. We aggregate all that information and publish it in a book called Iowa Public Library Statistics. All that information is also sent to the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or IMLS, to be added to data from every library in the country. IMLS provides that information on their website, so you can look at library data from across the country. Community analysis is the systematic collection, organization, and analysis of information about a community and its library. This next quote from a local city official states that community analysis is valuable to city and county personnel, economic development staff, and it can become a tool for the entire community. After a library gathers all of the answers to its questions through a survey or individual interviews, through focus groups, community groups, or some other way, it needs to organize and analyze that information. Who responded? What did they say? Where do they live? When do they use the library? Why do they use it? How do they use it? You've posed lots of questions and you've got lots of answers. Review it, organize it, and put it to good use. There are so many ways you can use your community analysis for library planning. Understanding the characteristics of the people in your community can help the library with collections, services, and programs. Who uses the library and why can help with marketing and promotion. Asking these questions can also tell you who does not use the library and why not. How are they using the library? Does this mean you need to reevaluate your space? Remember, the community owns the library and the space should meet their needs. What are the community's expectations of the library in terms of collections, programming, and other services? What new services might you provide and how will they be funded? What staffing patterns or library hours meet the community's needs? What organizations or programs can be partners with the library? How is your community changing? And then how do you need to change to adapt to those new needs? We're going to talk about partnerships at the end of this session, but the information you gather as you look at your community can also certainly help you identify potential partners. And last, remember, planning keeps your library proactive and enables you to prepare for the future. Writing a strategic plan is a whole course in and of itself, and one of my very favorite things to work on, but I'll try to limit myself to just a couple of slides about the importance of planning. How might all this information you've collected help inform a library's plan? I ask this question of library boards when I'm working with them on their strategic plan. Here are just a few of their answers. You could see there are lots of reasons why a library board should think about planning as part of their responsibility. I've identified a few of the questions you want to ask when you start to write a plan. So now let's look at the reasons you want to get these questions answered. What are the needs of the community is the question. Why? You want the library to be an integral part of the community. What is the purpose of the library related to community needs? The library must respond to community needs. Where are we now? You have to provide an assessment to understand the capacity of your library to respond to those needs. Where do we want to go? You need to understand where you're going before you can make progress towards getting there. How will we get there? For me, this is the big question that needs to be answered. It sets the course for the future. And how will we know what we accomplished? If you don't measure, you don't know if you've succeeded. Planning helps get to success. Now let's take a look at how we can identify some of those partnerships. Here's a quote from Mary Murphy, who is the library director in Perry, Iowa. Creating partnerships with other organizations, businesses, and other city departments can yield great benefits. In using collaborative partnerships, the library demonstrates how working together makes a difference in your community. But we need to talk about strategic partnerships. You don't want to partner with everyone who wants to partner with you. Not every partnership makes sense for every library. Another question is, how can you have active involvement with your community? Many libraries will pay for their staff to belong to a local civic organization or give them time off to attend local meetings. Some librarians actually serve on the executive boards of those organizations, like the United Way or the JCs. You can use the newspaper, local social media, or your Chamber of Commerce to help you identify potential partnerships. Once you know and understand your community and have identified their needs, don't forget to go outside your walls. A former library director from Colorado, Jamie LaRue, firmly believes that the library's most powerful asset is its staff. He wants librarians interacting with the community, answering their questions, informing their discussions, and helping them as partners to achieve their goals. These opportunities won't find us. We have to seek them out. Traditional reference questions are not coming into the library as they have in the past, but those questions continue to be raised by participants in community group meetings. Community reference involves sending librarians out into the community to work closely with groups and conduct on-site reference interviews as needed to discover and answer their questions. This process helps our librarians stay informed on the needs, goals, and direction of the community, allowing us to showcase our skills and services in a new way. We know that librarians are passionate about reference and research and are well suited to provide expert research assistance at little or no additional cost to the community. Many libraries have turned to embedded librarianship as one solution to better serving their patrons and demonstrating their value to their communities. This term comes from the expression embedded journalism, which was first used at the start of the Iraq War in 2003, when journalists traveled with military units and reported from within the action itself. Similarly, being an embedded librarian means being where your patrons are. Embedding looks different depending on the type of library and the goals of the project, but all embedded librarian projects are focused on being part of the patron's environment so that they can be available at points of need, rather than expecting the patrons to come to the library. In public libraries, the goal is also to embed library resources and librarian support at their patrons' points of need. This can include having a librarian provide reference support at local community organizations, such as those that support small businesses or veterans, immigrants, or the homeless. Librarians supporting municipal planning and local government, you can help with their research, or by providing library services at community events. All of these options bring library services to members of the community who may never have thought of visiting the library or about how it might help them. Douglas County Library's first experience with embedded librarianship occurred in 2006 when Jamie LaRue was invited to attend the meetings of the Parker Downtown Development Council. A group of property and business owners wanted to improve the downtown shopping district, so they invited staff, city council members, and other stakeholders to work with them. The library manager and librarians began attending those meetings and served as their secretary and in-house researcher. They researched things like local architecture or methods for economic development in small towns. When the group was asked to describe the value of the library service over several years, members mentioned the importance of the expert research the librarians provided, the communication that they facilitated, and the credibility a partner like a library brought to the organization. The library built strong relationships with these motivated community leaders, amazed them with their research skills, and helped the group grow into a formal nonprofit that now leads the community's drive for economic growth. And one last story. I worked with a city in Iowa that lost their pharmacy. The librarian was able to buy the blood pressure machine and put it in the library so people could continue to monitor their blood pressure and stay healthy. This same librarian also uses volunteers to walk kids from the after-school bus that drops them off downtown. The volunteers walk them to the library to keep those kids safe and off the streets. When the local Walmart was getting rid of one of their old photo processing machines, this librarian bought it and put it in the library. People who had never been in her building before now come to the library to get photos printed. And it has the added benefit of raising a little money for the library too. Her library is truly the heart of her community. I love this cartoon, which came from Library Journal, because it really does speak to how libraries can be at the heart of their communities. This concludes the Knowing Your Community module of the core endorsement course, Introduction to Library Services. Don't forget, you may always call your district consultant for more information about this topic. And thanks for watching.